Okay, so we have noon. We're going to go ahead and get started with Urban Bike Skills Clinic hosted by Stanford. One quick housekeeping thing before we get going on the slides is if you'd like to ask questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature in your toolbar and we'll take those at the end. A lot of you submitted some really great questions ahead of this webinar, so we'll take those too at the end. But feel free to ask questions as you think of them using the Q&A. So just to get started, here we'll advance the slide. To give you a quick agenda. We're going to do some introductions. I'll tell you who I am, and then Ariadne will introduce herself in the program. We're going to go over some things to remember while you're biking during this pandemic. And then we're going to launch into a bike safety review. So if some of you joined us for our Bike 101 webinar that we hosted in the previous weeks, that's great. Some of this will be a little bit of review, but we also have some great tips for how to navigate in an urban area. And then we're going to do a Q&A and a wrap up. So again, if you have your questions, awesome. We want to take them. Use the Q&A feature on your toolbar. And yeah, we're really excited to have you all here. So thanks so much for joining us for Urban Biking Skills.
I have one overview too. I want to let you know that this is being recorded and we'll share the link in a follow-up email. And also this class is Be Well very eligible. So we will send along a form that'll be signed and you'll have to forward it on to Be Well to earn credit. Okay, Anna.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Art. We're actually at the section where you could introduce yourself. So take it away.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Just from looking at the abundant resources that are available to Stanford, there's so much going on virtually. So we are grateful that you decided to join us today. My name is Ariadne Scott. I'm the Assistant Director of Active Mobility at Stanford. I manage the bike program. I think you all know we're designated a platinum level bicycle-friendly university. I've been car-free for over 20 years. I've come prepared in my visible neon vest, just as a reminder. This class is Urban Bike Skills, so we look forward to sharing our tips and follow-up today.
Awesome, thank you, Ariadne. And my name's Anna Walters. I work for a company called Bikes Make Life Better, and we partner with Stanford on bike programs and initiatives. So we're really excited to be doing this for you virtually. We're happy to help even during this pandemic where people aren't riding to work or to campus or to school anymore. But just a little bit about me. I manage bike programs for clients all over Silicon Valley, including Facebook and Uber, Stanford Research Park. And I've been car-free for 10 years. I bike in San Francisco, which is a very urban environment, and it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't have my life any other way. I also occasionally put my bike on BART and Caltrain if I need to go somewhere far away that I don't really feel like biking to, like Stanford, for instance. I just go to put my bike on Caltrain. So again, thanks for joining us, and we will move right into the slides. So biking during COVID-19. Many of you are probably getting back into biking for the first time, or maybe you started riding for the first time during this pandemic, and that's awesome. We love to hear that. But just a couple things to go over to remember while we're in this interesting, crazy period. The first thing is biking is technically allowed. We get that question sometimes, like, is biking something I can actually do when we're all supposed to be sheltering in place? And the answer is an emphatic yes. Biking is encouraged, especially if you're going to be making essential trips, like to pick up groceries. It's also a great option if you need to get out and get some exercise. Just stay near your home. Don't put your bike in the car and drive somewhere in order to do that exercise. Stay close to home. You will have to follow social distancing rules, so make sure to maintain 6 feet apart from other road users, cyclists, pedestrians that you may encounter. I also like to carry a mask with me just in case I'm on a cycle path where it's hard to maintain that 6 feet of distance. So just for some added precaution, I throw my mask on then. Some people will bike all the time with a mask. It's, I think, up to you, a matter of personal preference and also your particular county, state ordinances. But some cool things to tell you about during biking during COVID-19. The first is we're experiencing a time of increased road safety right now. So not as many cars on the road, not many people are commuting anywhere. So that means that if you're one of those people that maybe didn't feel as comfortable riding in traffic, now's a great time to get out there and see what it's like. I've been biking on some of the busiest roads, arterials that I never would have considered biking on before, but there's just so few cars that I feel perfectly safe going on them. So That's been really cool. Also, there's increased personal safety right now, especially if you're considering other modes like public transit or carpools, van pools, although none of us are commuting to work, or most of us aren't commuting to work right now. Just because you can maintain social distance on a bike. So you are a solo rider, you have complete control of your domain, and you're able to avoid other road users. So that's really awesome. Also, we like to point out that it is one of the only options you have right now in pursuit of health. So mental health, physical health, biking and walking, running are kind of the only things that are allowed right now during shelter in place, although I've seen a lot of my friends that are going kayaking right now in the bay. But it's a great option for you to get out and get some exercise. And we hope a lot of you have rediscovered the joy of biking outdoors during this pandemic. The one other thing I want to mention is that bike shops are considered essential businesses. So if you need something done on your bike, call your local shop, check out their hours. They're open. They're getting a lot of business right now, actually, because lots of people are out there biking. Another quick thing to mention is that we have a mobile bike repair service called Beeline. They'll actually come to your house and make a house call, so you can maintain social distance that way as well. You don't even actually have to go out and talk to them. They have everything that needed to fix your bike and get you back on the road. So there are all kinds of options if you have a bike that needs some attention, and we hope that you'll try them. Stanford also has some great COVID-19 bike resources on their website, so you can check that out at the URL below. Great FAQs. We're hosting some more virtual webinars for you too, so definitely check out that page. Okay, so gear. One thing I get a lot is, what do I even need to bike? It all seems very complicated. It's actually not complicated at all, so don't worry. And Ariadne and I came dressed up in our bike gear. So I have my Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition jersey on, although you absolutely do not need any sort of like special bike clothes. But we'll go over the essentials first. So first and foremost, you do need a bike. Hopefully most of you have them. If you don't, check out your local shop. You can even maybe ask a friend to borrow a bike. There's lots of ways to get a bike. You want to make sure your bike fits you. So if you have a bike that's way too big for you, it'll be hard to hop on the seat. If you have a bike that's too small, your knees will be cramped and knocking around. So make sure your bike is well fitting and kind of feels like an extension of your body. Also, very essential, wear a helmet. We like to say that your brain is your most important asset, especially at Stanford. So protect your brain, wear a helmet. Lights, also extremely essential when you're riding in the dark or low light. Some people use lights all the time. I actually did a ride to Santa Cruz. I'm in San Jose right now, sheltering in place, but I did a ride to Santa Cruz along a very beautiful forested road, but it was actually really dark in the middle of the day. So I put on my lights just to indicate my position to cars. So really you can use them, throughout all throughout the day, and definitely at nighttime. And they just attach to your bike, so they're really easy to take on and off. You just need to remember to take them off when you park it and lock it. Other essential things, remember to bring your pump and toolkit. I have a little hand pump that I just throw in my backpack in case I get a flat. You can also get ones that mount on the frame of your bike, so it's really easy. You don't even have to carry them. Some people like CO2 cartridges, which just load your wheel up with CO2 or your tire when you get a flat. It's really a matter of personal preference, so go check out your local bike shop and see what they've got. I like my little hand pump. I've gotten, I think, a total of 7 flats during shelter in place, which is kind of high for me, but that means I've been doing a lot more riding. So also important to have a little mini toolkit. I keep mine in a little pouch on the back of my seat. It just fixes right to my seat. It just has a multi-tool in it. Also some snacks in case I get hungry. These are all a little advanced, so you don't have to carry snacks if you're going a short distance. Also a bottle and a cage. So a cage, a holder for your water bottle, will attach right to your bike itself. This bike on the slide unfortunately doesn't have one, but it's really easy. And then you can just slip a plastic water bottle inside there, and then you'll be hydrated, especially during this crazy heat wave we seem to be having. Some things that are more optional but actually are a little more essential for urban riding are ways to carry stuff on your bike. I get a lot of questions about that. And in fact, we got a question ahead of this webinar on how to carry things on your bike. This is also a matter of personal preference, but one thing that's really easy is a front basket. You can have a front basket in your bike. put your backpack, your laptop, whatever else you need to carry in there. And that works really great. I think people really like that option. Also, this bike on the slide has a rear rack. You can kind of see a metal wire cage sticking up over the rear wheel. That's where you put 2 panniers or bike bags. These are large bags where you can stuff, groceries, anything else you might want to carry, and they just attach to that rack. I've also seen people, bungee cord egg crates on the back of racks. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do. Personally, I don't like carrying things on my bike. I like having a backpack. So I increasingly try and fit more and more into my tiny backpack, but that's just me. So, try some stuff out, see what you like, talk to your local bike shop representative. There's lots of great stuff out there. Other thing to mention really quick is Fenders. So we're very blessed in California with sunny weather all the time. And I can only say this because I grew up in Seattle where we get 9 months of rain. So when I biked up there, I had Fenders on my bike. Just because you needed it for the commute. It'll help keep you dry. It'll help keep water from spraying all over the back of your clothes and at the sides. So Fenders are a great option if you're going to be riding in all weather. Also, bike clothes. So you actually don't need any special clothes to ride a bike, although I know you see people riding in the full-on spandex kits and neon and crazy colors and everything, and they're cool, but you honestly bike in what's comfortable to you. I know people that bike in stilettos. I know people that just bike in tennis shoes. If you want to, get bike gear, you can definitely check that out. Bike shops will have stuff that's like more breathable, lightweight. The thing that's actually really important to remember is just to be visible. So Ariadne has a great reflective vest on right now. That is great. I have like a safety vest I wear when I'm doing some longer rides. Just anything you can do to make yourself visible and safe is highly, highly recommended. Okay, so now we're gonna kind of move on to the safety review and the rules of the road section of the presentation. And people ask me, okay, there's lots of things to remember, but is there anything that I really should remember? So I have some golden rules to share. And Stanford has these great posters that are related to each of these rules or tenets. So the first is just to be equipped. It's nice to be prepared. Have everything you need in order to make your experience a good one. So if it's really hot out like it is right now, definitely carry extra water. Carry tools, make sure that you have whatever you need to feel safe and comfortable while you're riding. That includes helmet, light, lock, everything. I won't go over everything on each of these little slides, but just be equipped. Next is be predictable. This is probably my favorite rule. Just because I think that you can apply it in all different situations on a bike. But if you're riding predictably, so you're riding with the flow of traffic and obeying all stop signs and signals, you are going to be much safer than if you're not riding predictably. Just because other road users are going to understand what you're doing, your intentions, you're where that you're expected to be, you are where you're expected to be. So they will give you enough space. They will also notice you and proceed with caution. The next one is to just be alert. This goes for drivers too. Honestly, everyone is so distracted these days, texting, talking on the phone, fiddling with the radio. So it does go both ways though. So if you are riding, don't be texting people on your phone. Don't listen to headphones, although you are technically legally allowed to bike with one headphone in, not both, but I wouldn't recommend listening to anything while you're riding. Yeah, and just make sure that you're constantly scanning almost in a 360 way to see who's around you, what are they doing, what are they intending to do, and then try and communicate your intentions with them, either with signals, which we'll go over later, or sometimes you can make eye contact with drivers, which I think is really helpful. So yeah, be equipped, be predictable, be alert. Those are the golden rules. So this is a review for some of you who have attended our 101 class, but we'll go over these really quickly and then we'll get into some more of the nuances of how you maneuver through intersections and stuff like that. But the first is to obey all traffic signs, signals, and laws. Bicycles are considered vehicles by vehicle code. So they have all the same rights and responsibilities as drivers and cars do. So you'll need to stop at all stop signs and traffic signals. Also, stop behind the white line at intersections, yield to pedestrians, everything like that applies. The next is to use hand signals. So this helps communicate your intentions to road users, and we'll go through what those hand signals are and how to use them in another slide. Third is wear a helmet. We can't emphasize this enough. We're biking in a car culture, so wearing a helmet is very safe. I always think about what my mom would say if I go out without a helmet. So think about what your mom would say. Be visible at night. This is also, according to law, you need a front white headlight and a red rear reflector in order to be legally safe on the road. So definitely have those things. And like we mentioned before, wearing bright reflective clothing only can help you and help other cars and road users see you. The next is to pass with care. So all the same rules apply to a bicyclist as drivers. So you're going to need to pass other vehicles or other road users on the left. And then just make sure to use caution when you're approaching intersections. We'll talk a little bit more about intersections, but in this particular image, you can see that there's a car that needs to turn right in front of a bicyclist. That's called a right hook turn. And they're one of those like little bugaboos for me that I'm extra super aware of. So I'm always looking for cars. I'm looking over my shoulder to the left for cars that might be turning right in front of me, because that's something that does happen. Drivers in California are pretty good. There's lots of cyclists on the road. So much of the time cars will slow down and let me go ahead before they turn right, but it's good to be super aware of that. And then the final thing to remember is to drive your bike. We like to think of biking as riding, but I actually like to think of it as driving, because again, you have the same rights and responsibilities as a vehicle, as a driver. So if you get in the mindset of like driving your bike instead of riding it, that will just help you be safe in the long run. Okay, so
I have one comment about lights, and you may have more insight because you're riding in the city more often.
sure.
But a lot of people are using bike lights during the day too. They're called daylights, and I know a lot of racers and training are using them for more visibility. So that might be something you consider too. You mentioned you use lights, riding in the day to Santa Cruz as well, and motorists can see those lights too. So you might think about that as an extra precaution too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I usually use lights in any sort of low light scenario. So at dusk, I'm never up in the morning for like sunrise, but, or also, yeah, if it's just a forested kind of dark area, I use lights. I think it can only help you. Although I haven't like seen all the peer reviewed studies, so don't, don't test me. But okay, cool. So hand signals. Hand signals are how you indicate your intention, so directions you're going to other road users. And you want to make sure to make these really predictable movements, so very emphatically communicate what you're doing. Before you signal, you make sure to scan the area that you're going to be going by looking over your right or left shoulder, just to make sure there's no hazards, there's no cars in your way. Then you signal using your hands, and we'll go over that in a second. And then before you move in the direction that you're going to be traveling, you'll want to scan again, just to make sure that area is still clear. So scan, signal, scan is what I like to remember. But let's get on to the signals right now. So this is how to make a left-hand turn. It's just your left arm outstretched. That signals that you are going to be moving left, either merging into a lane or making a full left turn. This is how you make a right. So right hand extended. I've also seen people use their left hand in an upward motion like that. I sometimes do that kind of out of habit. That also works to indicate that you're going right. And then this is how you indicate that you are slowing or stopping, just with your left hand outstretched, palm facing backwards. This is important if you have other people behind you that are in the bike lane. It's important to show cars what you are doing, especially if it's a situation that you're not approaching a light or something else that would indicate a stop or a slowdown. So that's how you communicate where you're going using hand signals. So I got a lot of questions about lane choice too, and it's a little tricky to know exactly what to do as a cyclist. Sometimes you kind of feel like, honestly, you shouldn't be in the traffic lane or on the road, just because it's, our culture ingrains that cars are for the road. But I really want to remind you that no, you are a road user too, and you have just as much right to the space there. So the first thing to remember is just to choose the rightmost lane that serves your destination. So depending on the direction you're traveling, you could be taking a right, you could be going straight, maybe you're taking a left at an intersection. Just choose the rightmost lane that serves your direction. So like an example would be, if you're taking a left-hand turn, and there's two left-hand turn lanes kind of on a busy road maybe. Be in the rightmost left-hand turn lane. So that might require you to merge across multiple lanes of traffic to take that left. If you're not comfortable doing that, there's other ways to take left-hand turns, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, so just rule of thumb, make sure to be in the rightmost lane that serves your destination. And that could be the bike lane if you're turning right, or it could be the bike lane if you're going straight. Lane positioning. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you sometimes feel like you have to hug the corner of the road or like a shoulder if there's no bike lane. Please don't feel like that. As a vehicle, you are entitled to space in the lane, and you can technically what's called take the lane. So be in the exact center of the lane so that other road users like cars will give you appropriate amount of space when they're passing you. So you can take the center, the left, or the right side of a lane, depending on the situation. The rule is if the lane is wide enough to share, then it's okay to be on the right side of the lane and let cars pass you with that 3 feet in the lane. More often than not, no, lanes aren't wide enough to share. So in that case, just take the center of the lane. Yeah, it's sometimes a little like counterintuitive, or it feels weird. But if there's not a bike lane and the lane isn't wide enough to share, just remember it's okay to take the lane. Okay, so left turns, the trickiest of maneuvers, especially in urban situations where there's lots of traffic. There's 3 ways you can take a left turn on a bike. And it really depends on how comfortable you are, how busy the intersection is, and kind of like what you're feeling. I do all of these left turns, so they're all completely valid ways to do it. The first is shown as the green trajectory, where you basically, are a car, or you act, as a car would act, and you merge over into a left turn lane and then take a left when the signal indicates that you can do so, or when it's safe to do so and there's no oncoming traffic. That requires you to scan, signal, scan again, and then merge over to use the left turn lane, which is the rightmost lane that serves your direction of travel. But maybe it's a busy intersection and you feel like it'd be hard to merge into traffic, or for whatever reason you're not comfortable doing that. That's totally okay. You can do what the blue bicyclist has done, which is go straight through the intersection, stop behind the white line where the car on the right is shown, and then cross the intersection straight, sort of in a 2-point maneuver. So it's called a 2-point left, or a Copenhagen left if you're if you know bike infrastructure, or you live in Europe or have lived in Europe. And that's a great option. I do that a lot, especially when it's like, Page Mill or really busy roads. Another option is to go straight through the intersection and then hop off your bike and use the crosswalk like the bicyclist in orange has done. I do that a lot, just to remember, if you're going to be walking your bike in a crosswalk, that's technically infrastructure for pedestrians, so you shouldn't ride through it, you should hop off and walk your bike. And I think Ariadne had something to share about Palm Drive on this slide.
This is a great example of the intersections on Palm, coming down Palm at Campus Drive and also Arboretum. There were a lot of questions about whether you can ride on the sidewalk or side paths. So on campus, we have a lot of miles of shared use paths, and you can ride your bike. We just ask that you use courtesy and respect for all users. So other people walking, or people pushing baby strollers. And when you come to the intersection, as a pedestrian, remember you don't always have the right of way. So make sure you use caution when you're crossing the street. As Anna mentioned, as a cyclist, you can dismount and walk your bike safely. Just remember safety first. But one mistake that we know about is, and we learned from the bike citation diversion class that Stanford public safety teaches, is that pedestrians don't always have the right of way. You can't enter the roadway until it's safe to do so. So that applies both to people walking and to people riding. So if you're in doubt and you don't feel safe, you can always dismount and walk your bike. And if you feel safe and confident, you can stay in the roadway and ride your bike just as you would driving a car. And then if you also want more protection, you're welcome to use our shared use paths as well.
Yeah, that's great. I usually use the paths whenever I'm at Stanford. I think those are really great. Cool. All right. Thanks, Ar. So this one's pretty easy and very straightforward, but just obey all stop signs and red lights. You are more predictable if you stop. You're legally required to stop. You can get a ticket for rolling through a stop sign in most states. So we all see cyclists behaving badly. We don't want to give ourselves a bad rap. So just obey all signs and signals like you would if you were a driver. Okay, let's talk about parallel parked cars. These are kind of tricky little guys. So when you're biking in a bike lane or even on a roadway, you might see cars parked along the right side. These are indicators to me to be more alert and aware, just because we're not sure if cars are going to be pulling out ahead or if there's going to be people inside that are getting out of the car, and we'll talk about that in another slide. But basically, I give parallel parked cars a 3-foot berth, just so I can react in case something should happen, like one of them pulls out in front of me. Some people might see like gaps between parked cars and kind of swerve in and out in order to give cars that are in the lane to the left of them more room. I would not recommend doing that, just because it's not a predictable way to move. Drivers don't expect to see you kind of cutting in and out of gaps in the parking lane. So just ride predictably, and I would give cars about a 3-foot berth when you're biking. And that leads us to the door zone. So the door zone is just basically that area, like to the side of a line of parked cars where a door can fling open unexpectedly, and then suddenly you have to react and hopefully do so safely. So this is another one of my cycling bugaboos, aside from the right hook turn, where I'm just hyper aware of the door zone, and I try and avoid it at all costs. So when you're biking, things you can look for that would indicate activity in this particular area would be dome lights that are on inside a car, passengers that are inside cars, cars that are idling, anything like that. You kind of want to maintain like hypervigilance then, and try and make sure you know what's going on in that car and what they're doing. Also, driveways in near schools and shopping centers, kind of exits and entryways to certain businesses, that's where you also want to be hyper aware of what's going on. And yeah, just rule of thumb, keep a 3-foot distance. And I'll tell you a story. I've been a cyclist for about 10 years in San Francisco. I do it, I don't have a car, so I do it for everything. And I'm really comfortable and confident. And I hadn't had a crash at all until last fall, when I was in a bike lane, in a pretty narrow bike lane in a narrow street, going along, keeping a 3-foot, or trying to keep as much distance between these parallel parked cars as I could. On my right-hand side were cars that were waiting at a light at the intersection up ahead. So they were all just, in their lane. I expected them to move right through the intersection. Unfortunately, while I was maintaining distance of cars on my right, someone who was in the traffic lane stopped in a car on the left. It was a rideshare passenger, opened her door right into me. Wasn't expecting it. Not usually something that you would expect. But yeah, long story short, I kind of hit my knee, had a little trip to the ER, which wasn't bad at all. I just wanted to do it for insurance reasons. And yeah, it was just kind of a headache and a pain in the butt. So it's just really good to know that prepare for the unexpected, try and prepare for the unexpected, and just be alert of everything that's going on around you, especially in this era of ride hail that we have going on. So, but it's not enough to keep me from not biking. So it was a pretty minor scrape. The only other thing was that Ariadne had to find a sub for me that day, because I was supposed to be leading a bike event and I couldn't bike. But anyway.
I have one more comment on the 3-foot distance. Another reminder is this also applies to following buses. So make sure that you give a lot of distance between you and a bus when you're riding your bike. They say that if you can't see the driver can't see you if you're following too closely. And at one of the bike safety diversion classes, a student shared a horrible crash story where he actually was texting while riding his bike behind a bus and didn't realize the bus had stopped. And he flew through the back window of the bus. And fortunately, he wasn't seriously hurt. Yeah. And interestingly, when he shared the story, there was a student in the class who actually was sitting in the bus and witnessed that happening. So I actually thought, did that really happen? But there was a witness to that. And so, you know, when you talk about urban riding, just be aware of the so many different scenarios that could come up. And I think Anna's first slide about be alert, be predictable, be equipped really apply to all situations when you're riding, because you don't know what the threat's out there. And we don't mean to scare you, but just being prepared. And the more you ride, the more comfortable you'll be. So a lot of you may not have ridden in San Francisco, but you know, if you just take a day and ride in the city and ride slowly, the more you ride, the more comfortable you'll be in traffic.
Yeah, definitely. And the cool thing is cities are putting in bike infrastructure, especially now. The slow streets movement is a thing. So there's streets that are fully closed off to cars right now, and might be hopefully in the future after we're back from or back to work from shelter in place. So there's also a lot of infrastructure that's designated to keep you safe and keep cars separated. So that is the good news. Cool. Well, thanks, Ariadne. That's a crazy story. Can't even believe that, kind of. Okay, cool. We're going to talk about bike infrastructure right now, which is great. So the Bay is fairly progressive when it comes to cycling. Also, we have great weather, so we can cycle year round. And here are some examples of things you might encounter when you're riding in an urban area. The first image in the top left-hand side of the screen is something called a bike box. We actually had one question come in before this webinar on, is it ever okay to bike to an intersection and then place yourself in front of a car? And generally, if you're using a bike lane, you should just stay in the bike lane and not kind of get in front of cars, like either in the crosswalk or some other area. But this bike box is a situation where that would be okay. The bike box is designated for cyclists. So usually on busy routes where lots of cyclists are using it, they can all kind of queue up in that bike box area. You want to be in the place that serves your direction of travel. So you can see that this cyclist is probably going straight. They are kind of off to the right of the bike box. That's a great position. If you're, if there's lots of cyclists, it's okay to kind of line up in front of that car. If you're going to be taking a left, you might actually even be in the left turn lane or the left lane over there. So just also, be smart about your positioning even when using infrastructure. But really excited to see these bike boxes because they help communicate that, hey, this is a bike route to cars, and also they let cars know that cyclists are ahead. So that's cool. The next picture on the top right is of a protected bike lane. We're seeing a lot of these, especially in San Francisco where I bike. But those little bollards help separate cars from the bike lane. The bike lane's really clearly marked in green. There's arrows and other cycling icons. So that's really cool. I love seeing protected lanes. I think that it really helps people feel more confident generally cycling. And the more people do it, the more people will do it. There's kind of a like build it and they will come mentality. The next is an example, it's the bottom left, and it's an example of a left turn box. So this cyclist is making a left turn. Cities have been putting these in just to make it more clear what cyclists are doing. It helps communicate intentions to road users. So cars are expecting cyclists in that box to be turning left. So those are really cool. The last thing is an example of tracks. So we'll talk about railroad tracks really quick. They're sort of a bane of our existence as cyclists, because if you don't hit tracks, streetcar or train tracks head on at like a perpendicular angle, you run the risk of getting your wheels stuck in the gap and then going over, and it's just not fun. It's happened to me on a rainy day when I was in Portland, and honestly, I saw someone do it, 6 feet in front of me, and I was like, that's not going to happen to me, and totally did. So you want to really maintain extra caution when you're riding across railroad tracks generally. But the cool thing is cities are putting in these plates that help close that gap between the track and the pavement. And it just makes it safer for you to roll over them as a cyclist. So lots of really great innovations happening in urban planning and bike infrastructure. And I think we're just going to see more of them, especially after the pandemic, when more people have started riding and have gotten used to the slow car-free streets. So yeah, I can't wait for more. Okay, so intersections are one of the more dangerous places to be if you're a cyclist or just any road user. That's just because you have so many people, cars, pedestrians converging at a single location, all doing different things. So here are some do's and don'ts to remember when approaching intersections. The first is just to use the rightmost lane that serves your destination. We've said that before, so just make sure you're positioned correctly depending on where you're going through the intersection. You want to occupy the center of your lane at intersections generally. This is just to, claim your space, make cars pass you at safe distances, indicate your intentions to other road users. We've said this before, but you want to be scanning kind of all around you, especially at an intersection, just to make sure you know what other people are doing. And then also make sure to clearly signal your intent. So if you're going to be turning, clearly stick out your left hand if it's a left turn, right if you're going right. Stopping and slowing, also good to indicate. And then just anticipate when you might be invisible. So places of invisibility, blind spots. If you're, hanging out in a blind spot of a driver, that's usually not a great place to be. We're all drivers, or most of us are also drivers and cyclists, so we understand kind of the hazards of being a driver. Also, like I mentioned, driveways, places and sidewalks that are designated entrance and exits. Those are places where it's just harder for drivers to know where you are. So use extra caution when you're around those places. Okay, some don'ts. Don't make a left-hand turn from the bike lane on the right. So this is what we talked about before. If you're going to be turning left, you don't want to be in the bike lane and having to cross multiple lanes of traffic in order to do that, especially the cars that are coming up from behind. Definitely merge over and use the left-hand turn safely, or do a 2-point turn or something, one of the turns we talked about in the left-hand turn slide. Don't squeeze yourself between cars or kind of like shoot gaps. That's never a good idea. If you don't have a bike lane and you're approaching an intersection with cars that are also approaching, get behind the cars and drive your bike. You don't want to kind of take the lane and pass them on the right, or pass them on the right. They're not used to that. That's not very predictable. Don't turn or change lanes without knowing the position of every other car and bicycle around you. It's just really helpful. You won't get surprised that way. So some people will make a left turn and they won't really indicate it. They'll just kind of stick a pinky out. Be very emphatic with your hand signals and your intentions. It'll help keep you safe. And we talked about this, but don't cruise along in someone's blind spot. They can't see you there. Okay, braking. Very important thing to know how to do on a bike. Also very easy to do. All you have to do is depress both brakes on your handlebars. Just to let you know, the front brake has approximately 70% of the stopping power. So that's usually the brake on the left-hand side. If you need to stop in an emergency situation, press down hard on both your brakes and you should be good. If you're biking in the rain, just remember that you might require extra time to stop, and also following distance should be increased, as you would do if you were a driver. So really easy to remember. Shifting. Shifting is like one of those math things that I'm not so good at, but other people are good at. So if you want to know more about shifting and how your gears work, we're going to have a great webinar in June, I think June 27th, with my colleague Robert. He's going to go over the fundamentals of shifting, how it works, and what you can do to optimize your shifting. So, but just the basics here are shifting's purpose is to match the gear selection on your bike. So higher speeds require higher gears, lower speeds require lower gears. And if you're going to start climbing, or when you're stopping or slowing down, so when you're reducing your speed for any reason, you want to downshift. And then you want to upshift to accelerate quickly. So when you're trying to get up to speed in order to merge into traffic, that's a really good example of when you should upshift. I'm kind of one of those people that feels things and doesn't necessarily think about the mechanics. So I will just, shift. It becomes second nature at some point. You just know how to shift your bike to the optimal kind of gear. But I recommend attending our webinar on gearing and shifting because Robert has a lot more detail to share with you. Okay, the last thing to cover when it comes to safety and bike skills, especially in urban areas, is riding with others. Right now, we're not really riding with others because that sort of violates social distancing and shelter in place. You can ride with members of your household or your kids and stuff like that, but you shouldn't really be going on group rides at this point. However, you might want to go on group rides in the future. So here's some things to remember. And also this helps if you're going to be on a path that's narrow, but it's a multi-use path, so you'll encounter pedestrians and other cyclists that might be moving more slowly. Here's what you do. It's polite to announce when you're passing someone from behind, and always pass on the left. So if you have a bike bell, that's a good time to ring the bell and say, hey, passing on the left. If you don't have a bell, just call out, hey, I'm here, I'm passing on the left. And that'll help people move over. I like to slow down too, because sometimes like people, especially pedestrians, will kind of freeze and not know what to do. So just, try and be respectful. We have a lot of people using a small space, and that's important. Also, if you're going to be on a group ride with other cyclist buddies of yours, here are some things to remember. You'd like to communicate what's happening up ahead to the cyclists who might be behind you. So if you see some glass, it's good to point it out. You can just point. Sometimes I use like the fairy dust, there's glass right there. Also, if you see anything like a person ahead of you that's like oncoming, you want to say, hey, cyclists ahead or cyclists up. Poles, sometimes multi-use paths have these poles that make it so cars and other vehicles, larger vehicles, can't use them. But if you're really in the zone, sometimes you don't see that. So it's nice to call out, hey, pole, and then people know not to hit it. And the last thing I'll cover, and this really only comes up if you're doing more advanced group riding, is something called drafting. So if you're riding single file and a pace line is what that's called, you might see that bicyclists are really blocked tight together, almost like a couple inches or so from one another's wheels. That's a skill that you should practice doing before you ride a pace line. But just so you know, drafting is when you ride closely, you put your front wheel really close to someone else's rear wheel that's ahead of you, and then they take all the wind resistance. And then it makes it easier for you to pedal. So you can ride pace line and draft off people, but it's really polite to ask them before you do it. So approaching someone you don't know on a path and drafting off them without asking them is kind of a no-no. So don't do that. I was really lucky. My first ever commute ride, which was, I'm a little bit insane. And I was like, I can do a 40-mile commute ride, sure. I was thankful enough to have my friend with me who let me draft off him during like this really crazy headwind area around the airport, actually. He also like gave me some goo when I was sugar crashing. It's really good to have friends who know how to bike. So that's another thing to remember. If you're feeling stuck at all, ask a friend. Bicyclists are usually really happy to share, their knowledge and what they do with other people, especially new riders. All right, so really quickly, if you're going to be biking in urban areas, you'll probably be locking your bike in urban areas, and the risk of theft is just a little more elevated than keeping your bike in the garage in a suburban place or something like that. So you want to make sure you have a sturdy lock. We recommend a U-lock as shown in this diagram. And when you lock your bike, you want to lock your front wheel and your frame to the rack, and then secure your back wheel with a cable or a chain. If you're really, sensitive, maybe you have a really nice e-bike, someone asked about that, I would recommend getting a really heavy duty lock where you can lock both tires and the frame to a rack. I have a nice touring bike. When I take it out in the city, if I need to haul something, I take my U-lock and a big chain lock, and I can get both tires and the frame locked in that. Really, if you can keep your bike in a secure place like a bike room or somewhere else like a friend's house, I think that's usually a better solution. But I lock my bike all over, and actually never had my bike stolen from a rack in the city, but someone did break into my garage a while back. So that was a bummer. So actually also your garages could be targets. Anyway, so that's how you lock your bike. And because you're part of the Stanford community, you have access to all kinds of great resources, and these are actually public on the website. But check out the Stanford FAQ. If you have a bike question, someone else has probably had that same question and it's answered there. So that's a great place to start if you have questions. We also have commute planning assistance. So if you're looking to do a bike commute for the first time and you've never done it, you can fill out a form with information. So, where you're coming from, where you're going, contact information, and we'll email you an actual commute plan, route, answer any other questions. We basically want to be there to help you succeed in the biking you're doing, especially the commute biking you're doing. And that, if you want to email us, you can at commuteclub@stanford.edu. And that is the end of our presentation. Woohoo, we are right on time, so we're ready to take your questions.
Great. I would say, so I have a few that have come in while we were talking. We'll talk about those. I just want to assure everyone that we had maybe over 20 questions submitted before this webinar, and we will send out the Q&A. We've answered all of them, and we'll add the questions that have been coming in since the webinar started, so you have information. So the first one is, how dangerous is it to ride when it's raining or when the road is wet and slippery? How slow should we ride?
Oh, that's a great question. So when it's raining, you know, the pavement's slicker, and if it hasn't rained in a while, it's going to be extra slick from all the grease. So I would suggest, you know, half speed almost, like that feels good to me, but it really is a matter of preference. And then just increase your following distance between you and other cars or other cyclists, other people on the road. Things to watch out for when it's raining is surfaces that may not be slick in dry weather become slick. So surface paint can sometimes be sort of dangerous areas. Grates that cover the subway infrastructure, like on Market Street in San Francisco, those become like a little bit more dicey. So I almost avoid going over those or go really, really slowly over those. Also, how big your tires are will help you feel safer. So I have a road bike and it has thin tires, good for speed, not so great for inclement weather. So I'll take my bigger touring bike, which has bigger tires in that situation. That just helps me feel safe. But there's no kind of like exact calculation that I know of, unless Ariadne, you know of one in terms of stopping. And okay, yeah, I like to go half speed. It just, I feel better, but it's a matter of preference.
So another question that came in, a motorist is tailgating me and I'm in the middle lane. What do I do?
That's such a hard question. I mean, as a bicyclist, you are entitled to take the lane. So you have every right as that motorist to be there. But you want to, you know, if you have a bunch of cars stacked up behind you, it is polite and customary, even if you're a driver, to pull over to the right side at a safe place. Make sure it's not like, you know, a narrow shoulder where you have no space. But if there's like a cutout or something you can pull over on, or even like a sidewalk really briefly, I would do that and let the other cars pass you. It's such a, I want to make sure that you're feeling safe though. So if this guy who's tailgating you or person is making you feel unsafe, like take the action that you think would be appropriate to sort of solve the situation immediately. And that might just be like cutting over really quick and hopping on the sidewalk. But yeah, sorry that happens.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Safety first. You know, my tendency would be to try to get out of his way, because someone that's agitated, he probably isn't going to mellow out on the roadway. So if you do have to bail and move to the right, just make sure that it's clear. Make sure there's no traffic coming right and just pull over to the right. If you're a strong and confident rider, you can hold your place, as Anna said, in line. But when in doubt, just get out of the way for sure.
Definitely. And yeah, it's always tricky. So I always tell people, if you don't feel safe, like make a change, but do it safely so you feel better. Yeah, cool.
So let's see, we had another one come in. Someone asked about if we had a recommendation for a basket to carry a pet. And there were people responding to that they probably thought it wasn't a good idea to ride with a pet. I know I could never ride with my dog in a basket. At the past Bike to Work Day event last year, there was someone that rode with the dog in their trailer and actually had a seat belt, so the dog was secured. I think because the roadway is so unpredictable, you know your pet, I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to do it. You know, having a pet unsecured in an open basket, I think is jeopardizing the safety of your pet, and a trailer might be more appropriate. But there's nothing sweeter than seeing, you know, those little fluffy dogs being ridden in the front basket. But I would just use extra caution when you're doing that.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great question for a bike shop. They might have some kind of pet-friendly basket or something to carry your pet in, and it works great. But yeah, great.
Here's another one about cars lining up at the left turn stoplight. Can I come to the front of the line? I don't feel safe waiting 3, 4, 5 or more cars back.
And I see people do this you know, all the time, and it's tempting to like shoot gaps like that or go around and pass cars on the right in order to get ahead of them. Technically, you're supposed to be a vehicle when you're in situations where you're in the traffic lane and merging. So I would recommend just getting behind the cars and, you know, turning like other vehicles that are making a left. Or if you don't feel safe doing that, it's always okay to make a 2-point left turn or use the crosswalk and walk your bike. So that's what I would recommend.
Here's another one, very specific question to cycling on Palm Drive shared paths. I am a slower cyclist. Where should I bike? To be out of the faster cyclist way, closer to the middle of the path and the side reserved for pedestrians so others can pass on the left, or closer to the left edge so faster cyclists can pass through the middle. So those paths on Palm Drive are shared paths. They're two-way travel paths. But my recommendation would be to stay to the right if you're a slower rider. That way the people coming behind you can see your intention. And if you stay to the right, just keep continuing on that right-hand side, they'll know and they'll pass on the left. And hopefully there'll be a respectful cyclist that will say passing on the left. But I think probably the most safest place is to be on that right side of the pathway.
Yep.
Let's see, we had a few more questions come in. Oh, we do want to mention that the Health Improvement Program, HIP, does offer a fall-winter biking class, riding in the rain, dark or cold biking. And it's a great class presented by both Jane Rothston with Be Well and also John Ciccarelli, who owns a company called Bicycle Solutions in San Francisco and was one of the first bicycle programmers at Stanford in the 1990s. And he actually offers custom classes for people that want to learn how to ride. And they have a great instructor, Maylin Ko, who works at Stanford Healthcare, who also teaches for John too. So we'll include his link to his information in our Q&A. They come highly recommended. Let's see, I think we had one more question. I think riding in the rain and slippery roads, how fast should you ride? What's the recommended speed? I'm going to defer to Anna from Seattle on this one. I mean, my take is you should ride an appropriate speed that matches the conditions. So you can't completely slow down because you'll lose your momentum. So just use caution. Don't ride through big puddles of water because you don't know what's underneath. And just, you know, be predictable, use your hand signals so you let other people on the roadway know what your intentions are.
Yeah, that's good. It's really a matter of like how comfortable you are and how safe it is for conditions. That's a really good point.
I think we answered. Let me quickly, we answered all the questions. I'm going to look. We have 5 more minutes just to respond to some of the questions that came in beforehand. Is it ever okay to bike on a sidewalk instead of the actual street on busy traffic areas like El Camino?
Yeah, I get questions about this a lot. And sidewalks are for pedestrians. So if you're going to be using that infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, sidewalks, crosswalks, you should be hopping off your bike and walking your bike. And this is just because that is the predictable behavior. So again, if you see like cars or you approach driveways where cars are coming out, they're not expecting to see a cyclist like cruise by it at full speed. Also, pedestrians get a little unnerved if you're biking really fast next to them. It's just not safe to be biking on the sidewalk. So don't do it. Just walk your bike.
Another question coming in is, do you have a bike recommendation?
Oh, personally, oh man. So I always say that a bike should feel like an extension of your body, and it should fit you in a way that makes you really excited to ride it, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you don't want to ride your bike. It doesn't work for you. Your knees are like knocking. My personal bikes, I have 2 bikes. I can only have 2 bikes, although I want like 6 bikes, but I have a small studio apartment and no bike storage. So they live with me. And I have a Cannondale CAD 12. It's a road bike. It's also my commuter bike. Some people think that's a little weird, but I like it. And then I have a Salsa Via, which is a steel bike, and I do cross on it, so you can take it on dirt trails. It's technically an adventure bike, but you can also take it bike camping, you know, bike touring. It's my sort of all-purpose bike, but I like my Cannondale.
I think Anna mentioned this earlier. The best way to find a bike that you like is to visit bike shops and test ride as many bikes as possible. And now, because of shelter in place and bike shops identified as essential businesses, they're making appointments. So you can't like have a lot of people in the store. So they're giving like undivided attention to their customers. And it's a good opportunity to go in and not be intimidated by being overwhelmed by, you know, 100 bikes on the floor. They can take time with you. So I would strongly recommend that. Also, the campus bike shop is open during shelter in place too, and they rent bikes. So you may have an opportunity to test ride or take a bike out and apply the rental to the purchase program as well. And, you know, a matter of preference, some people like road bikes, some people like upright bikes where you're sitting in a more comfortable position. And I think, you know, it's more a personal decision. So whatever works for you and gives you confidence as a rider is definitely the way that I would go.
Great follow-up, definitely.
Yeah, I think we have one more question time. Is it ever okay to ride two abreast in a bike lane?
My answer would be no to that. And I admittedly haven't looked at the law, and it might vary, you know, based on city ordinances or counties or states. But no, just because it's not a predictable maneuver, and there's usually not enough space to share a bike lane. You want to be able to have a lane and have cars be able to pass you at a safe distance. And generally, if you're riding two abreast, that won't happen. So my advice would be single file in a bike lane.
Someone asked if this recording will be available later to watch again, and yes, we'll send the link after maybe a few days, but we will send the link out to that. And then lastly, I just wanted to address, because this is coming from more the Redwood City area, they were asking about Middlefield between campus and Redwood City, with the lanes on Middlefield being too narrow. And so in that case, you can definitely take the full lane. We have posted on our website suggested routes that we feel are safe to ride from campus to campus. So we'll share the link with that as well. I think that wraps it up. Maybe one more question just came in. I rode along the Bay Trail over the weekend and some portions were closed. Do you know if there's an online resource that shows areas that are closed?
That is a really good question. I also rode the Bay Trail on the weekend from San Jose to San Francisco, and I didn't see too many, but I also cut in at different places. You can check, the Bay Trail does have a website, and they should be posting closures there. I mean, I've seen a lot of cities have like COVID-19 updates, so check with your local city, and then also whoever like runs the path, whatever municipality. I don't know who runs the Bay Trail, but I know they do have a website. I look at it a lot, actually.
We can make sure that we include that link to the Bay Trail too in our Q&A. And then I just wanted to, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you all for joining us. We hope that you take away some new tips and skills, and we will follow up with a complete Q&A that answers all your questions, and also the Be Well Berry. And then, as Anna mentioned, we have 2 more webinars coming up in June, June 17th and June 24th. We're going to repeat this urban skills on the 17th, and on the 24th is the expert demystifying how to shift and understanding gear. So that was actually a suggestion from one of our previous classes. So if you have ideas for classes, please let us know, because during shelter in place, we're going to continue to host 2 webinars per month. So a lot of opportunities to share our knowledge. So thanks again for joining. Thanks, Anna, for your excellent commentary and expertise. And we hope to see you on the road. Bye, all.
Bye.